Hey, y'all. Happy Sunday. Welcome to a little bit different kind of a Sunday live Q&A. We're going to try this out. I'm going to have a guest this week. Yes, you're my first Maurice. This is Maurice Erickson of Erickson Design and Woodworking. A gentleman I've been following for a little while now, several months, and I'm just in love with the stuff that you're doing. And I had to get you on and just start picking your brain on some of your design processes and some of your just want to get inside the mind that comes up with some of these projects. So, welcome aboard.
Well, definitely appreciate it, Mark.
All right. Before we get started, though, I do have to do a shout out as I do every week to my friend Steve over at Harneal Media, the man who sponsors Mark Lindsay CNC.com. And I'm here to tell you if you are looking to get into a website, and believe me, you are. If you are starting a business, you're running a business, you do need a website. It does several things for you. It helps you market and it gives you legitimacy. A lot of sponsors look for things like that. A lot of affiliate programs require you to have a website. And it's just good business sense to cut out the middleman and stop paying these commissions when you sell your products or services. So there's a link to Harneal Media in everything on this channel, and it's that way for a reason. Not only is he very competitively priced, but you get 100% personalized service. You always deal with Steve, and he gives you performance. He doesn't give you excuses. So do yourself a favor, head over to Harneal Media. Again, there's a link in the description in every video on this channel, and it's that way for a reason. Hit that contact us button and reach out to Steve. You cannot go wrong. And thank you for everything you do, Steve. I appreciate it greatly. So, Maurice, howdy. I hope you're doing well today.
Yeah. It's a holiday weekend. Memorial Day is tomorrow.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had a lot of time in the shop over the weekend, and I was
Sweet.
gonna push a video out earlier, and still working on it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know that feel. It's real easy to get buried in real life. I say this as a guy who just finished running fence yesterday, so I know exactly what's going on. For those of you who are not familiar with Maurice or his work, um, let me bring something up here real quick and show you. He runs a tidy little ship over here on his YouTube channel. And you may have seen some of these videos come up in your suggesteds. We're talking about 3D wooden puzzles. I mean, not just puzzle pieces. That's impressive enough, but then carving a 3D wavy pattern over the top of them. Going above and beyond the call. I mean, come on. And then making some wall art that looks like tufted leather. Um, Incorporating that into a box lid with some redwood burl that looks just absolutely gorgeous. Then we'll get into some of your laser marquetry work, which is just gorgeous in and of itself. And uh, I'll be honest, it was this cribbage board right here, that veneer inlaid cribbage board, and then the keepsake box that you made for it that just made me go, oh, are you kidding? This is just amazing here. So I had to come and talk to you. Folks, there's a link to Maurice's YouTube channel down in the description. And if you're not already subscribed, number one, shame on you. Number two, get over there and get it done. Um, uh, you'll be amazed as well as just seriously impressed with some of the craftsmanship that's going into some of these projects. I mean, these are just crazy, Maurice. And
Um,
that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on and talk to you, was simply because I wanted to find out where the heck do these ideas come from.
yeah, no, and you know, there's a lot of things that go into it, and you know, I live in Colorado Springs, and you know, outdoors, the mountains are right there, and I'll sit on my back porch and I'll drink coffee and I'll stare at the mountains, and that is where all of, you know, the mountain scenes that I do with veneer for the Marquetry, all of that is inspired based on the mountains, and really fortunate that that's right there, and
Yeah.
that translates really well for keepsake box or anything else, and that's just it gets incorporated.
Okay. So you basically, your inspiration is your environment, just whatever is around you
Right.
and
Yep.
invites you.
And some life lessons, and you know, where I've been in the world, and um, for those that, you know, don't know my background or anything like that, I joined the military back in 2008. I've been in the United States Army all the way until about 2 years ago, and then I transferred over to the Space Force when I got to Colorado Springs. But within the 14 years of Army time, you know, I spent about 10 years overseas, from Korea to Germany to the Middle East. All of those experiences always, you know, it's been a part of me for a long time, and I'll leverage a lot of that in some of the work that I do.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of flags, which are,
Yeah,
are always cool, and your cubed satellite plaques. You're in a unique position in that not only are you currently active duty, but you're right there at Colorado Springs. I mean, there's a massive military presence there.
right,
So making any kind of a project with a military theme is gonna have its fans.
right, and yeah. So, and that's basically how I started.
Mhm.
Because I was overseas for so long, you know, I couldn't work in the garage. I didn't have a shop. I didn't have any of the tools.
Mhm.
And when I got to Colorado Springs, I made a big effort to, you know, try to get something established in my garage and get some tools and start working with my hands. And that led into opportunities to make things for different organizations. I'm surrounded by 4 military bases here,
Right.
and that is, you know, all the joint services from Army to Navy to Air Force, specifically the Space Force.
Mhm.
And I think it was right when I got my CNC machine. I was experimenting. I made one cribbage board just to try to, you know, do something with it. And somebody approached me with, you know, a retirement gift that they were going to give somebody, and they had somebody try to make it, and it didn't turn out the way they wanted it.
Right.
They were supposed to give it, you know, to the person that next day, and they gave it to me, and I was like, "Oh boy, let me see what I can do." So I spent the entire night into the morning, and I came up with this cube satellite plaque.
Uh-huh.
And from that day, I started making those things, and they have just I make probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 a week now.
Really?
Just for everybody that's transitioning, PCSing.
Mhm.
They're really good keepsake items, and what I'll do is
They absolutely are.
I'll bring up an example here,
Okay.
and I don't know if you guys can see that. Yep.
Yeah. There
Um,
we go.
so, and that's just a basic idea. Those are six-sided cubes.
Mhm.
They're completely symmetrical, and I, I didn't at the time think that it was going to be something that I was going to make a lot of. So
Right.
I just made a one-off, and the idea of, you know, just doing a CubeSat, and like, there's no rules or anything like that on trying to make it look like a satellite. So I
Right.
just made a simple exoskeleton, and those are just six-sided, you know, machining operations.
Right.
Fast forward, when I started making a lot of them, I decided that, you know, I need a streamlined process to start trying to make this a reality to where it was sustainable,
Yeah.
and I was able to make a lot at a certain time. So
Right. Kind of get into
that's
a production run type of a scenario.
production run. So what I ended up doing, and I'll share this, is I ended up making bigger operations to where I would put a stop on my CNC machine, and as long as I cut those blocks square,
Mhm.
um, the four sides are extremely easy, so I can do 8 at a time now.
Right.
And the price point on these plaques, one of those blocks is about $800 worth of satellites. And
Wow.
that opened up an entire world of like, holy crap, I can make um, I can make a little bit of profit to feed all the materials that I really want to work with. That was just
Right.
completely outside the realm of what I wanted.
Right.
Um, and it fed tools purchases, the bits that I wanted, and that has sustained itself over time, over the last couple of years. And
That's great.
in the background of this picture, you can see some of the marquetry.
Yeah.
Um, that was directly off the laser machine, and that was actually a Colorado mountain scene with an F-15 in the background.
Oh, that's what that is. Okay, I
That's
was.
what that is.
It almost looks like a valley, but now I see that it is. Sure enough. Okay.
Yep. And
Now,
oh,
now
go ahead.
these satellite plaques, the CubeSat plaques, have really taken off more than you expected them to. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just being in the right environment and finding out what the market was and what the
Yeah.
need was or the wants.
Yeah.
And just doing those opened up different projects. As like the first year of me owning my machine and having some tools, and then it just kind of grew from there.
Now, are you gluing up? I see there's a Purple Heart. Are you gluing up pieces of Purple Heart to get the right thickness, or are you just buying extremely thick material from the get-go?
Yeah, I'm using 8/4, and
Okay.
8/4 can range just below 2 inches thick.
Right.
And so purposely, when I plane it,
Hmm.
these blocks are exactly inch and 7/8. So I'll take
Okay.
an eighth worth of material off just to make sure that I can get it completely square.
Hmm.
And now it's just flipping each operation, each side.
Yeah.
Um, and then once these blocks are completed, I'll just cut each individual satellite off, and then I'll
Hmm.
machine the two sides that I can't get to on the end grain.
Right.
And that completes the 6 sides.
Okay.
Each one of those sides for those 8 satellites is time.
Is about but you kind of froze for just a second. Is about how much?
20 minutes of machine time.
Oh,
And
really? That
I'm
fast?
very conservative with my speeds.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, especially working with Purple Heart, that's a hard wood, so
it's a hardwood.
you've
Yep.
got to be kind of. Did you have to do any kind of adapting to Purple Heart that you don't have to do, say, with maple or cherry or?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Every medium is different on the way you want to make chips.
Mhm.
Sometimes you get the speeds wrong and you'll make dust. And then
Yeah.
you make a little note
Mhm.
in your notepad, and the next time you can make the adjustments. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Real important to do. It's
yeah,
always an evolving thing. There isn't really any one magic number that's going to work for every material. That's for sure.
yeah,
In fact, I even went so far as to, I think we all pretty much have in tool databases, at least on the Vectric side of the house. Now, you're Fusion 360 user, correct?
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. On the Vectric side of the house in our tool database, we can create categories
Yeah.
like for acrylic, for hardwoods, for softwoods, what have you. I've even gone through and made one for maple, one for sapele, and things of that nature because the speeds for maple are different than they are for something like cherry or oak. Not much, but different enough to matter so that I'm not constantly going back and forth and trying to remember or dig out my notes and try to figure out, well, was it that one or was it this one? I've got that category built in, and that's a good starting point. So,
Yeah. And it is so nice to have a tool library,
mhm,
especially if you pick a manufacturer for whatever bit company that you look at.
mhm,
Having that as defaults I mean, it takes all the guesswork out.
Yeah.
And it is when I go through Fusion 360, I'm not adjusting those settings. Maybe just a little bit, just based on prior experience with that, medium that I'm using.
Yeah.
But I rarely ever change any of those.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So,
Um, let's see. So, military background. Thank you for your service, by the way, one vet to another.
thanks.
How about woodworking background? I mean, has that been something that you've done for off and on most of your life, or is that something that you just kind of picked up?
It's new to me, and I only started this when I got into Colorado Springs. I knew that I wanted to do some type of machining. And before my time joining the military, I was a welder at a welding company that I loved, and that portion of my life, it was so enjoyable that I never wanted to not go to work.
Mhm.
It was that enjoyable. And 2008 hit, and the economy crashed, and I was
Yeah,
unionized, and I was the first one to go,
really.
and that's why I went into the service.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but being overseas so much that watching YouTube and watching other things, like I always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And that's why when I knew I was going to be here for an extended period of time, and it was the right time for me.
Okay. So you've been at this for about a little over 2 years then.
About that, yep.
Yeah. See, we corrupted another one, y'all. Good job.
Yeah. But
Well, welcome.
you'll see it in my videos, like, I don't have a lot of experience with different types of mediums and wood moves, and like there was a huge learning curve, and I just dedicated a lot of time and took notes.
Mhm.
And when something didn't work, I would redo it, and
Yeah.
got it to the point where it did work. And
That's probably the number one thing that bites machinists who start to come into woodworking side of the house is if you turn something to a tolerance on when you machine something to a tolerance 999 times out of a thousand it's going to stay that way
right,
where you mill a piece of wood to a certain size and it's going to change this evening. It's
correct.
never going to be that same size again because it constantly moves, and that cheeses off a lot of machinists because you can't get that 4-digit resolution with wood. You just can't, you
Yeah.
know.
And is it really needed? Probably not.
No, it's not.
Everybody really wants to concentrate and deep dive into that stuff, and
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, how much effort and how much risk of the overall project being successful, and the probability of that, it's you can accept a lot of a risk, and in your design process. And matter of fact, let me pull this up, and this will help kind of gauge this.
Well, I catch a little bit of flack from the machinists out there. They'll post comments to my videos because I'll say something within 5 thousandths, and that's good enough for woodworking. No, it's not. You got to get down in there to get it as close to zero as possible. Well, ideally, you do want to try to get as close to zero as possible, but it's not necessary because it's going to
Yeah.
change. Okay, what do we got here?
Yeah. So let me bring this. So a
Oh,
customer reached out to me, I think it was about a week ago.
hmm,
And this was the idea that they wanted. They wanted to do a retirement shadow box. This is an example that they sent me. And they're
okay.
like, hey, can you give me a quote, and can you make it look like this? And so I spent about an hour and a half just kind of going through the design work, and I was trying to gauge how big this thing was.
Mhm.
And there were some other pictures of this one specifically that I found on Google that I could pinpoint. And I ended up sending this back to the customer as a quote. Let me pull this up.
Okay.
Oh,
Retirement shadow boxes are big.
they
I'm
are.
telling you.
And sometimes they can be very complicated.
Mhm.
There we go. All right. Can you
And
see my Fusion
that,
360 model?
yes, and that is your model. That's your preview of what you.
Yep.
All
So
right.
I do have some, integrity
Mhm.
requirements, what I'm willing to do for a customer.
Right.
And at the end of the day, they can either say yes or no. And if
Right.
they say no, I can change a little bit. But I'm only comfortable with what I want to put my name on.
Right.
And nothing against the other builder that did the other project. I do things a little bit different.
Mhm.
And so within the hour and a half, I did this entire model. And what I did do when I designed it is I took everything into account on actually making it with physical material.
Right.
I didn't draw anything that I knew that was not capable within my shop to make. And going back to wood movement and everything that goes with that, that's
Right.
already built into this overall model, to
Okay.
where I can control that. And the final product is something that will last, a
Right.
couple lifetimes.
Right.
So, but this thing is very big. And so from the original picture that they sent me and what I sent them back as far as a quote,
Mhm.
there was no corrections, and they said absolutely, let's push and let's make it, which is
Okay.
awesome. But that's you want to try to strive for that.
Yeah.
Instead of going back and forth for weeks and what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with. And but there's a lot of work with this, but the majority is all CNC. These
Mhm.
cherry inserts into
Mhm.
the walnut is already pre-established to where I can just put it in my machine and it will cut out, and now it's just assembly.
Yeah. 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 And that's the beautiful part about it. That's the beautiful part about it. I mean, once you get that dialed in and you get those first few practice cuts made, I mean, I use old fence boards for that kind of thing because I have no problem throwing something into the fire pit that was scheduled to go into the landfill, you
Yeah,
know. So I go through a lot of old fence boards for practice cuts, and once you get that dialed in, the repeatability is just, I mean,
right.
that's what helps. That helps more than anything.
Yep.
But
And it's very simple. It's, these
yeah,
pockets are predetermined with,
right.
the post processing that I'm going to do.
Mhm.
And then, it's cutting out each piece, and the machine time required to do that and the material costs all goes into that quote.
Sure, sure, sure. And that's one advantage to having a military client base in is that certain regulations, certain expectations, folks have an idea of what they want in their mind. It's pretty much cut and dried. You're not going to make any wild changes to that. That's basically rank insignia
Right.
that
Yep.
is established. I mean, a sergeant's rank is a sergeant's rank, a staff sergeant's rank is a staff sergeant's rank. So you're going to work within those confines. There may be a few stylistic changes in there involved, but not really.
Right. And it's really good that you brought that up, because I downloaded an SVG that had all the ranks
Hmm.
because I didn't want to dedicate time to recreate something that's already there.
Hmm.
But what I did do is I modified it to make it work with what I wanted it to work with.
Right.
I did the same thing with the American flag, the wavy flag.
Yeah.
And some of the other things is if you start with a good base and you can modify it
Right.
and you can change it, there's really nothing wrong with that. Or I could have dedicated, 4 hours and really deep dived and made sure, this rank, you know,
Yeah.
it was made, but it's just sometimes it's not economically feasible.
And
Uh,
sometimes it's just not necessary. I mean,
right.
when you look at that, you know what it is, you know.
Yeah.
So
Um,
that it's not really open to interpretation. So about the only modifications that I could see anybody would want would be in, what materials you used and maybe a background velour color or something like that. So
right.
you know.
And so I think Michael asked the question of how confident in the accuracy.
Well, no, they're talking. My chat sometimes goes off on their own little
Oh,
tangent.
okay, yeah, no
They're
issues.
talking of, they're talking about moisture meters.
Ah, okay, got it.
So there's a good one. Do you use a moisture meter
I
to
do.
check?
I
You do.
I test every piece of wood that I use,
Okay. And
and
which?
all that goes into the account on how much wood movement there will be. If
Mhm,
I plane something,
mhm.
it will dictate how much I do on each side to keep it even because it's going to release that moisture, and then
Yeah.
you can either go this way or stay flat.
Hmm.
All that stuff matters.
Or banana.
Or banana, but
Yeah, sure. Well, which type of moisture meter do you have? You have the pin type or the pinless?
the pinless. Yeah,
Pinless.
I made an investment because again, it really does pay for itself
Hmm.
in mistakes that are going to make it to the fire pit.
Hmm.
Yep. And sometimes you don't know that it has trapped moisture in it,
Hmm.
and you get all the way finished, and all of a sudden you'll see something move, and you're like, "Oh
Hmm.
crap, this shouldn't have moved."
Yeah.
And that could really that could be devastating.
Now, so you said you invested, so I imagine you didn't buy one of the $30 cheapies off of Amazon. Um, how fast do you think you recouped that investment?
Fast, right?
Mhm.
That's 5 satellites for that week. Bought one.
Really? Okay.
So and I'm fortunate because I have that revenue stream,
Hmm.
and but like that could end tomorrow,
Yeah.
or where that need goes away. But I was very pinpointed with how much money goes back into the shop.
Right.
Everything goes back in, and if I really need something for a future project, that's always
Hmm.
prioritized the first thing I'll buy.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah,
Okay.
everything is dedicated to go back in.
That's a good way to be. I'm a home hobbyist. I don't make things to sell. I will take the odd commission here and there if it's offered to me and I can do it and I want to do it. That's the other one. Do I want to do it?
Right.
Most of the time, no. Um, the but if I could make it self-sufficient, self-sustaining, so that I can get the right tools that I need, then I'm a happy guy. So. If I can make enough revenue in to pay for tools and supplies, I'm a happy guy because
Yeah.
I don't want to be writing a check off of our household account.
Right.
Um, Dwayne Ruthig has a good question here. Um, do those the CubeSats, do they require a license, or is that
Well,
copywritten or trademarked or anything like that?
oh yeah, no. So that was just original design.
Hmm.
Um, so there's no license requirement that I had to buy an SVG for.
Okay.
I basically just referenced a couple different, little cube satellites and the
Hmm.
way that they looked in some of the pictures, and then I just built that exoskeleton. And I wanted to make it really easy for the tool pass, so
Hmm.
everything was just really clean. And then the depth of cut gives it that really three-dimensional uh, little details that are inside the actual cube.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
and the first one I did, like it was basically flat, and I didn't go all the way down to where I'm at today.
Hmm.
And it didn't have that look to it.
Yeah.
So when I increased that depth on each side, it really changed everything.
Yeah, gave it gave it that made it really just pop. Yeah,
Right.
uh, let the shadows and light play off of it. Butch Miller is asking, how are you calculating the amount of wood movement?
Yeah, I guess. Well, so it's like, I'm in Colorado Springs and it's really dry here,
Mhm,
right? If they took that shadow box to Georgia,
mhm,
that completely changes everything on how much movement, seasonal movement, that will retain some of that
mhm.
humidity level. And
Yeah,
it can go anywhere from a 32nd all the way to an eighth of an inch of movement, depending on the
mhm,
material that you use.
right.
So when you make the inserts, if you allow just for a little bit of movement, you're not gluing everything so tight and so rigid that it can't move, and then you'll start breaking seams, and
Yeah,
it'll just never last.
Yeah, especially around the military because people are
moving.
they're moving all over the world.
Right.
And what you make today could be in Okinawa next year, and then 3 years from now be in Georgia, and then in another 3 years back in Colorado Springs.
Yep. And
So
then that entire time, that thing is doing this
yeah,
very slightly in it. But if you glue everything so tight, and everybody, wants to have really tight seams, and you got to be really careful, and you just got to
yeah,
allow that movement to happen.
yeah, yeah. You have to make a provision for it. I mean, I cringe when I see people putting breadboard edges on tables and they glue everything in place. It's like, well, you're going to have a bad week because that's gonna, man,
I
yeah,
think it was a couple years ago. I made a cutting board, and I was the one that put a border around it. That
yeah,
was, the grains didn't match up.
hmm,
Within a week, that thing busted out and it
yep,
cracked right down the middle.
yep. It'll do it. It'll
Yep.
do it. Yeah, nature always wins, and trees will wood moves long after the tree is dead. So you just have to accept that, you know. I mean, you look at a breadboard edge on a properly made table, and sometimes of the year the tabletop will be narrower than your breadboard end, and other times of the year it'll be wider, and you'll have a gap there that won't match up. But that's
Right.
what wood does, and it's going to do it whether you want it to or not.
That's why I
So,
like working with veneer, because I can use a substrate of plywood,
mhm,
and I can make that substrate, look completely different. Any option that I want, as
yeah,
far as the different material or burl or curly, name it. Um,
uh-huh,
but it allows that, you know, um, that moisture just won't seep into that,
yeah.
and so you can get around a lot of that. So
Yeah, I I gotta admit that I am not really big on. Let me rephrase this. I'm not real experienced when it comes to working with veneer because I've always looked at marquetry as just a little bit of magical voodoo involved in that, you know. Which is why I was kind of flabbergasted when you told me, yeah, you kind of learned this by guess and by gosh, watched a lot of videos, and I've only been doing it for 2 years. And I'm like, there's no way he's come up with that in 2 years. There's no way. But evidently it's the case.
yeah, matter of fact, let me show this. I did this about a month ago,
Mhm.
and well, yeah, I'll show this one.
Yeah, and I do want to get into your marquetry and talk quite a bit about that because I know we have a couple of people out here in the crowd who do marquetry themselves, the good old fashioned way, fret
Right.
saws and what have you.
Yeah, no, and yeah, my hats off to those guys that can do it by knife, and um, that is real craftsmanship. And I use a laser machine, and I can use digital media, and I can really dig into the weeds on a lot of it. But I couldn't imagine cutting everything out by hand, and the dedication that would take, because
Yeah.
there is dedication there.
Well,
Um,
I put that down to pure witchcraft and wizardry. And you know, how somebody can get something so tiny to fit in there and cut out and just get it to match up so perfect to me is like you're not human. You're just not human, and that's all there is to it. So,
Yeah. So this was a retirement box for a colonel that I worked with,
yeah,
and what ended up going in this box was a whole bunch of letters from the personnel that were inside the organization, and just there was a lot. I only had 3 days to build this box, and so the outside of the box was quilted maple that I got from the Northwest, and then just an assortment of different veneers that made this mountain scene.
yeah,
And I'll show the top of the box, and there were some things that went into it. And
yes.
then what
Well,
I'll do is when I show this, I'll
mhm.
pull up the file and I'll show you what it actually looked like when it went into the laser machine and the file that I created.
Yeah, Butch Miller says my marquetry was the same way, learned by doing. And Butch, you were the one that I had in mind when I said I know there's a few people out here who do marquetry, and Butch is that guy.
Yeah. Um, and so, yeah, the laser machine cut all those little pieces out.
Mhm.
And then when I did the original drawing, sometimes I'll leave an offset in, depending on how tight the seams that I want it to be. And
Yeah,
sometimes I don't. I'll just make one file that has no offsets, and then the glue seams will give it more definition of a black
yeah.
line or a different shade of that color, and it breaks that apart.
Now,
Um,
do you tint the glue or are you using like a dark tinted glue pre-made?
those none of that stuff is tinted.
Okay.
Um, that red dot right there is red heart,
Mhm.
and then the rest of it is natural veneer woods, different species, different combinations.
Well, I meant that black outline around some of the parts. Are you tinting the glue or are you just using
Sometimes I
like a
will.
dark glue?
Yeah.
Okay.
I ran into a mistake. Actually, I think I tossed it. I was doing a very big chessboard, and I
Mhm.
had a bunch of inlays
Mhm.
for a specific design for a really good friend of mine,
Mhm.
and I wanted it really dark. The lines that are associated here, I wanted it really dark, so I used True Trans or Trans Tint,
Mhm.
and I used too much of this stuff, and it bled. And
Oh, no.
when it bled, it bled through the entire veneer. And I didn't see it
Wow.
until I started my final sanding, and then all of a sudden I started seeing some weird tint come in, and a little bit of sanding a little bit farther down, and it was done.
Yeah.
So you can buy different tints that are already tinted that
Mhm.
won't bleed,
Yeah.
um, but you can't seal a lot of this stuff and then put everything down and then expect it to glue and last for an extended period of time. It just
Right.
won't bond right.
Right.
And when it bleeds, it'll go
It'll let
south.
you know. Well,
Um,
I spoke with one of the chemists at Franklin Industries. Those are the people that make Tite Bond glue. And I asked him specifically, can you tint Tite Bond 3? My idea was I want to tint it black. So when I'm gluing a maple fretboard onto a maple neck, I'd have that thin little black pinstripe there. And he
right,
told me, he said, yeah, you can use any acrylic craft paint, the 50 cent a tube stuff or bottle stuff at Walmart, up to 3% by volume. And it won't affect the glue's performance at all.
right. Yep.
So
Um,
just throwing that out there for folks in case you want to try to experiment with tinting your glue. But
yeah. Just be careful with the bleed.
mhm.
It does happen depending on the type of tint that you use. I use acrylic to tint all of my or color all my epoxy, and
Mhm.
there's different ratios and how it affects the cure process and
Right.
yeah.
Now,
Um,
before you glue down the veneer, now I know you said all this is laser cut, but do you do anything special to the substrate? Do you paint the substrate so in case you have a little pinhole or something that doesn't line up exactly, that's what shows through or?
nope, I'll sand it to 120.
Mhm.
I won't go any farther than 120 as far as the grit.
Uh-huh.
And then I want to make sure it's completely flat, and then
Right.
that's basically the only prep. Um,
Okay.
and then yeah, I'll put a very thin layer of transfer tape,
Mhm.
and I'll work off of that instead of taping each individual piece to hold it
Okay.
into place and then glue. Um, I'll just lay up that transfer tape down, and I'll input all the different pieces, and it's just a big puzzle
Yeah.
at the end of the day. So,
Yeah.
but what I'll do is I'll show you the file that I used for this.
Okay.
Um, I'll pull up
Um,
Fusion.
while we're doing that, Brooks Martin is asking, how thick of veneers do you use?
I think they're right around 0.06 or actually 0.02. They're the thinnest that you can buy.
Okay.
Which, you got to be really careful how much sanding you do once
Right.
everything is laid down, because you can, and it's delicate.
Hmm.
It can chip depending on what type of material that you're using for the veneer. If it's burl, it can chip.
Oh yeah,
And
but burl, because you have grain going in every direction at the
you
same
have
time
grain
with
going
burl work.
everywhere. And
Yeah.
if you put it in the CNC and you want to do a pocket,
Hmm.
there's a good chance that that radius that you put in, or that corner, that's going to chip.
Yeah.
And I don't know if when you were watching the cribbage board inlays that I was doing with veneer,
Hmm.
I sealed all of it with epoxy to prevent the chipping. And
Yeah.
I only left, I think it was maybe a 30-second of epoxy just to seal it. And then I would take that out after the fact.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that just increased the probability that I was going to be successful
Right.
at the, that stage.
Yeah.
Because once it's chips, it's you basically have to start over.
Yeah. 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 Especially on something that intricate. Um, and as you said, with grain going in every direction at the same time, you've got to stabilize it somehow.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't do anything with it. About all you can do it is,
Yep. So
Okay, here's
here's the Fusion 360 file, and this is the base sketch
mhm,
that I used. And there's not a whole lot that goes into this. They're just simple drawings. But what I end up doing is I start with this base, and then I'll delete and you know everything but that layer that wants to go in there.
yeah.
So the first layer of mountains
Mhm,
is a specific veneer set,
mhm,
whether it's a different texture or it's a different color. That all goes into account. And with the sun being in the background, as long as you go from lightest to dark, it makes sense, and it will create a level of depth um, of the veneers that you use, and you get some pretty cool results out of it.
yeah.
And you can use any kind of veneer. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the second layer, these are all, and they just stack up. And what's important to know is I didn't put any offset in between these two lines, and they're
Okay.
separate. So when the laser machine does this second layer, this file that I put in, it's only cutting out those pieces.
So you don't have to compensate for the kerf of the laser beam at all.
Correct. And I
Okay.
use that curve as a black line to break these two objects up and just giving it just another dynamic in it.
Mhm.
Now I can put a very small offset in here
Uh-huh.
um, to take away that black line of glue, and I can
Mhm.
make it very seamless. But it's just a preference of mine that I like to have that break
Mhm.
in between the two veneers. It's
I,
just
I
it's just an extra dynamic.
I agree. At first I didn't know what I thought of it until I saw a side by side comparison of something without that black line
Right,
and the black line. And maybe it was just the projects I was looking at, but I liked that little black line better than
right,
I did the no line at all. It gave it more definition.
correct.
You know,
Yep,
obviously, things out in nature, when you're looking out your door, not everything has a black line around it, but not everything is made of wood veneer either. So,
right. And you can see just, it does take a while.
Mhm.
Um, but these are the files that are created to go into the laser machine. And, once it's in the laser machine, it'll cut this out within 10 seconds. It's
Yeah.
very fast. If I was to do this by hand, like, I would
Mhm.
spend a month
Yeah.
just making sure every one of these were lined up with either a knife or a scroll saw, or something
Yeah.
along those lines. And
Yeah.
it takes a long time.
So
So
I take it you've never used a veneer saw.
no, no, I haven't. I
I'm
think
I'm
eventually I will, just to try it. And
I'm rotten with veneer saws. I'm really bad. I have attempted. I am really bad. It wasn't my, they weren't my tools, so I didn't invest a lot of money, but I'm really, really bad at it. Now,
Yeah.
Dwayne was asking, was the border added after the veneer? So, what I'm going to kind of take off on that and ask, do you make the pocket then size the veneer to fit that, or do you create the panel like this panel right here and then size the box to fit that panel?
Yep. I'll do this. I'll have a good idea whether I want the box size to be 12 by 6,
Hmm.
and I'll leave extra material on these corners to
Right,
where I can cut that off and I can really size it after that, because you're not losing too much
right.
detail unless you have a very specific design feature that you want in there that needs to be in there,
Hmm.
and then I'll work around that.
Okay. So, do you cut a pocket for that to fit in, or do you frame it after the fact, like
As
on a
far
box?
as this panel, the
Yeah,
veneer panel,
right. So what I'm getting at is, do you frame it after the panel is done and applied to your substrate, or do you leave room for it when you're making that box lid?
yeah, no, there's no pocket.
Okay.
It's completely flat and it will get glued right to that substrate.
Okay.
And then when I make the box, I'll just do a simple rabbet and shoulder, and that
Oh,
gets
okay.
inserted in there. And
Okay.
depending if I want the box to be flat, completely flat, where there's no seams, and I'll pull the box back up here, um, because this box was completely flat on top.
Right. And that's
And
what I was wondering about. And I think that's probably what Dwayne was asking too.
yeah, and it's simply just doing a shoulder rabbet joint,
Okay.
and allowing enough space so you can sand the edges off, to get it completely flat. Or there's some, people will use, um, they'll leave this raised, and
Hmm.
this panel will just sit in and there'll be a lip.
Okay.
Um, you can
Yeah.
go either way on that. But again, these are just simple, rabbit and shoulder joints, and they slide right in. And
Okay.
I don't put any glue within these joints.
Right. So your panel, your marquetry panel is free floating.
Right, and it's in there.
Mhm.
Um, and you can get kind of tight, but all my glue and all my strength are coming from this joint, and then
Mhm.
the splines that are holding them
Together,
together.
right. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So,
Now,
but yeah, this panel is completely flat against the substrate.
now, did you use the ferric nitrate on that quilted maple?
No, no. Um, I'm
Because
still
that's
trying to experiment a little bit more and dial in.
mhm,
Um, I didn't want the box to turn red. I
mhm,
wanted it to match the sky.
right. And I'm wondering
And
how you got that effect, if that was a stain or if that was part of your finish or what.
yep, no, this is all natural wood colors that just have a simple oil on it.
Okay. Okay.
Yep,
Okay. That's just the absorption of the oil. Okay.
correct. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Awesome stuff. I'm telling you.
It's fun. I have so much fun doing a lot of these things, and the videos don't really capture what I'm doing,
Mhm.
every week or every 2 weeks.
I don't
Um,
imagine they could.
yeah, no, it's just there's a dedication of time,
Mhm.
and you got to prioritize what you want to do for,
Yeah.
if it's design time for one day,
Mhm.
that's usually a plus.
Yeah.
And then how I do all the prep into getting into the shop, working with material, and then
Mhm.
the videos take a lot of time for the post process, production, and
Yeah.
um,
Editing. Yeah.
editing. And again, this is all part time.
Well, this dovetails in with what Butch Miller is asking. As an active duty service member, how do you find the time to do as much as you do?
Yeah, and it's very easy to get kind of crazy with it,
Mhm.
and you can overexert yourself really, really fast. There was a period of time last year where I was waking up at 6 in the morning. I would do all my duties for the military side all the way until 6 o'clock, about 12 hours.
Mhm.
And then I would come home, change, go into the shop, and I would be in the shop until 3 in the morning.
That's
And then I
crazy.
would rinse and repeat that, for way too long.
That's the
And,
recipe for burnout.
very true. You
And
know,
it's a very real thing, believe me.
yep. But when you have passion and you want to do this stuff, it's hard to stay out of the garage.
I
And
I will agree with that 100%. I will agree with that 100%.
yeah,
So, um, let's see, we have another couple of questions here. David Hittenberger is asking, which cutter or bit is your go-to for your pockets and inlays?
yep. I've been using Armana bits,
Mhm,
and I have a really nice 1/8 inch spiral upcut,
mhm.
and that's just making sure all those chips and all that stuff is exiting. You know,
Okay.
you got to get it out of there. If you want a really nice edge, you know, each cutter is different on the
Right.
purpose of that cutter, and that really, dictates the results that you get when you do an operation. If I had a spiral down cut, that's different. If
Yeah.
I have a compression bit, that's different,
Yeah.
and it leaves different edges, and just it works the material just a little bit different.
Yeah. 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 I agree with that. Sometimes there isn't one bit that is perfect for every job, or even the same job. You know, I'm surprised to hear you say upcut because I find that down cuts give me a much better finished edge,
Yeah,
and it's simply because it's shearing that wood fiber downwards. And but then again, sometimes the top surface isn't the important surface. Sometimes it is the bottom surface of a pocket
right.
or something like that. So,
Yeah. And matter of fact, let me show you. I'll bring up Fusion again, and the project that I've been working on. I've had this in the shop for like 3 weeks trying to make this thing work. And
mhm,
over the weekend, I made a big push to try to get this done.
mhm.
Um, Let me show, just in case somebody hasn't seen this yet. I'll show some pictures of the puzzles that I've been making.
I wanted to get into your puzzles because I know we're going to get some questions on how you get those tolerances right to where the
Yeah,
puzzle pieces go
we can
together.
talk through that. And these have been super fun. I was very, surprised on just how enjoyable
Hmm.
a lot of this has been. And this I made four about a month ago, and I did a video on that. Um, and I apologize too because I try to talk in my videos. Sometimes I think this time I was there was so much going on that I just didn't have time to make the script and go
Yeah.
through. It's, again, the post production stuff that takes a lot of time.
Yes, it does.
But these were four sets of puzzles that I did. These models I didn't create, but what I did do is I used a puzzle generator that
Uh-huh.
produced an SVG file based on the dimensions that I wanted, how many pieces I wanted, and how many connectors that I wanted, and it built that SVG for me.
Oh,
I
wow.
took that SVG and I put it right into Fusion 360, and then I started extruding edges and tried to get the depth that I wanted,
Mhm.
and then I overlaid that with a 3D model and cut that into it, and that gave me all the dimensions that I needed to make that puzzle work. Um, so that was really fun. And let me pull up the one that I'm working on now in Fusion, and I'll pull this up.
Yeah, the so it was a puzzle generator that you used, an online generator?
Yep. I can I'll share one of the links when I this is going to be a future video that I do, and I'll make sure I
Okay.
put the generator in.
Okay.
Um, and what I'll do is I'll hide this and I'll pull up the sketch. So that puzzle generator produced this.
Okay.
And there is no offset into any of these drawings or any of these lines.
Okay. Because each
Um,
piece is going to be cut out separately, obviously.
right. And this is what the file looked like directly out of that generator.
Okay.
From there, when I inputted it into Fusion 360, I had an overall dimension that I wanted to reach. And I think that was 12 by 6.5.
Okay.
And this is going to be an American flag wavy puzzle with individual pieces. And
Okay.
what I wanted to do was constrain the width of each stripe to make sure that I hit that 6.5. So everything is very dependent on all the stripes and how the union joins with each stripe. Um, that gave me the overall dimension. So I had to go in and kind of clean up the edges just to make sure I was exactly at 12 by 6.5.
Okay.
But that's what it looked like at first. And
Mhm.
then what I ended up doing was, let me hide these. I extruded each one of these puzzle pieces out.
Okay.
And these are all, I was shooting for 3/4 of an inch.
Right.
The final dimension of the puzzle will be just a little bit off from that. But that's my base material that I need to make in the shop for the machine to be accurate.
Okay.
So from there, I had to figure out how to align all the stripes, the union, everything to do for me to put this into the physical machine with
Right.
material. And I ended up doing a little bit of math. And let me hide this. And then I'll show you how these puzzle pieces fit inside this.
So you made a huge oversized flag.
Yep. And this gave me room to add my um, the uh, the bracketry to hold it down, my hold down
Sure.
method that I have in my machine. Um, but this gives me make sure these are actually visible.
It,
Yeah, it's
you're
going to give me a little bit of a problem. Um, I don't think it'll let me click this. Interesting. So Fusion can be aggravating at times when you want to do something. Sometimes it just doesn't want to work properly. But let me hide the base material. But this is what I'm making as far as physical material.
okay.
And each one of these stripes are aligned specifically based off the puzzle piece when it's completely assembled.
Okay.
And let me take this off. So inside that, those are all the puzzle pieces per stripe
Right.
to actually machine. And I left enough room for my cutter to go through and cut all these pieces out.
Right.
Again, I didn't put any offset for any tolerance that was needed. I'll account for that in the tool path that I generate.
Yeah. Marcella Balone is asking, do you use cutter compensation or let Fusion give you the tool offset?
I'll program that in specifically within a specific option within Fusion that gave me the offset required to make this thing work.
Okay.
I could have, offsetted the original drawing and put a manual offset in there,
Right.
but you run risk if the offset isn't correct or for some reason that tolerance and that fit of that puzzle piece just doesn't work. Now I have to adjust the entire drawing again, and that can take hours.
Yeah.
So there's options in Fusion that you can go through and you can specifically put in the exact dimension of every single radius and corner and how that cutter interacts with that edge.
Okay. Now, I knew this question would come up. How much offset?
Right. And let me hide this. And the goal when that cuts out, that's what it should look like. And then I ended up just doing a 3D model for the contour that this thing is going to be. But I really wanted to focus on or kind of foot stomp this. Each one of these lines for each one of these puzzles has to align.
Right.
And so you got to start with a good base material with known distances. And
Mhm.
when you align these puzzle pieces within these constraints, they
Right.
have to be perfect. And if they're off, they're off, and you can't
You're
do
going to
anything
see
about
it.
it.
Yeah,
Yep. And I'll
exactly.
show an example of what that actually looks like. One of the mistakes that I made for the original cut. But let me I'll pull up the cam and we'll go through some of these options here.
Okay, because you're using window instead of full screen, there are some pop-ups like your menu that you're going down. We can't see that.
Ah, okay.
So we can see what's on your main screen, but we can't see everything.
Okay, got it.
All right.
Um, I'll pull up one of the windows and one of the cut files.
So basically there is no magic offset number, is there?
Not really. But what I did do is I'm gonna have to go back on this. What I did do is I cut 4 instances out,
Mhm.
and one had a total of 0.01 offset between
Uh-huh.
each piece.
Right.
And then I stepped it down from there and I made them extremely tight. And then I just, out of the 4, I picked what was the best fitting
Best one.
uh, as far as the option. And then I just kept that as a default for the rest of the pieces.
Okay.
And
And that's subject to change based on the material, right?
correct. Yep.
So starting at 0.01, and that's imperial. So, let's see, 0.01 in inches would be that'd be about a quarter of a millimeter, 0.254 millimeters.
Right.
And then work your way down from there to
Correct.
even smaller.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I have a puzzle piece here that I've had in the shop for about a month and a half, and the fit is starting to change
Okay.
because the stuff is swelling.
Yeah.
And it could be just, climate change that's happened over the past, month. More
Hmm.
moisture in the air, maybe the humidity level has changed. So
Hmm.
these fits, they'll change over time, and you have to account for all that wood movement.
Yeah.
Um,
I would imagine they're
but
going to change quite a bit over the course of just a year because it tends to be drier in the summer, most places, and wetter in the winter. It just depends, around here, that's the way it is. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, and we get most of our rain between October and about March. And that's when it's really humid. I mean, humidity levels 80% up to 100% because we get real dense fog. But you get into summer and you're talking about humidity levels down at 20%.
right.
So, or 10%. Okay, there we
Okay.
go.
Can you
Now,
see my
okay.
options now?
Now I can see all that. Yes, there we
Perfect.
go. In fact, I'm going to make this full screen. Go ahead.
Yep. So now these tool paths are just following this bottom edge contour.
Okay.
And that's a simple 2D contour tool path.
Hmm.
And this automatically brings these options up, and I select my tool that I want, and I have the entire tool database that's loaded. Most
Uh-huh.
softwares do this exactly the
Right.
same, and they're
Yes.
just predetermined defaults from the manufacturer for that specific bit.
Right.
And from here, I don't change any of this. I'm comfortable with the 18,000 RPMs for my spindle speed, and
Hmm.
then my cutting feed rate and my lead in, lead out, um, and my cutting feed rate is exactly where I want it to be. I've never had any issues with any of those defaults. Um, When I
Okay.
come in and I select this entire corner, that is the entire profile for this puzzle piece, and I'll select all of them in sequence.
Okay.
Um, that's the only thing that I change. I don't have to do any of the tool orientation or stock contours. I don't have to put any of that stuff in.
Right.
I have the option to put tabs in,
Uh-huh.
but these are dangerous.
Yeah, they are.
Not because the thing just sits there perfectly,
Mhm.
that's good. But when I address those tabs and I have to delete them off the finished piece of material,
Yep.
I can either not remove enough material and now my tolerances don't fit correctly,
Yep.
or I remove too much material and it just looks weird. I don't have a clean edge.
Yep.
And so you'll see that I tape. I'll leave just a little bit of material from the bottom of my material that I'm cutting out of,
Yeah.
and the bottom of this cut, and I'll just leave that excess material on there. And at the end of the day, I'll just put it through my drum sander and I'll delete that material, and I have a very, very clean edge. So the tabs are not really useful for me right now. Bigger pieces that I can't fit in the drum sander, I'll have to put tabs in.
I wish I had a drum sander for just that reason. For those of you out there that have never heard of using that method, it's called onion skinning.
Yep.
Basically, you're not cutting all the way through the material. You're leaving just a real thin skin. And then you can, as you said, either masking tape over the top or transfer tape or whichever, then flip it over, run it through your drum sander, and then sand through that little thin onion skin on the back. And it's very effective. Very, very effective.
It would take me, you know, a half an hour to delete those tabs off.
Hmm.
You can use a router and you could just shave them right off. That's
Hmm.
an option. But these radiuses can get pretty tight, and
Yeah.
those bearings can't fit perfectly, and you'll see deviations, and it's painful.
And I
Um,
do not like sanding tabs off of curved surfaces anyway. I try to go for as flat a spot as possible. But when you're
right?
talking about making tab A fit into slot B, that sometimes just isn't an option. You can't be
Yeah,
sanding that after it's come off the cutter.
correct. Yep. And so from there, these are all defaulted. The retrack,
Hmm.
the heights, safe heights, all that's pre-programmed in based on
Sure.
the what your dimensions of your material is. It's
Right.
already preloaded. But this is the most important portion for me, and there's only a couple settings that I'll change. I'll
Hmm.
add multiple depths, so I'm only doing very slight step downs
Sure.
for the material that I want to remove.
Hmm.
And then I'll add a finish only at final depth.
Right.
And then that finishing path is this dimension. So each one of these you'll notice like little edge marks as
Uh-huh.
it's going down, and that could
Right.
be deflection. There could
Right.
be there's a whole laundry list of things, or you're not trammed perfectly.
Right.
And you have a little deviation that is not completely 90 degrees from the cutting surface,
Yeah.
and you'll have these little small little deviations.
Little
And
witness marks down the side. Yeah.
yep. And so adding that final pass at depth is the cutter will remove 0.003 worth of material on the entire edge of this
Right.
model. That
Right.
gives me 0.03 for this piece, a negative for my
Hmm.
offset.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
then this next piece will be the same thing, and it will add that negative 0.003. And that'll give me a total of 0.006 for my tolerance between each one of these male connectors and the female connectors.
Okay.
When I
Okay.
did the original puzzles that I posted a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
I ended up going 0.005, and that gave me a 0.01 deviation for my tolerance.
Yeah.
And that was pretty smooth. There was a little bit of wiggle room, and they were kind of loose,
Hmm.
and that's why I decreased it just a little bit, and it gave me some really good fit. But again, that wasn't included in the original SVG, and I didn't, do an offset on that original file
Right.
because for some reason, I find out 6 months from now that um, it just wasn't sustainable over time, and
Yeah,
the amount of wood movement was going to decrease. So I can just go in for future generations, and I can change this to a little bit larger tolerance
right.
to account for it.
Okay. 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 Um, in Vectric, we have something similar in a profile cut. It's called a separate last pass. But the difference is what it will do. For instance, in your case, you're looking at 4 passes to cut
Right.
that out. What it will do is the first 3 will be cut slightly oversized, whatever your tolerance is. You put in 3/1000ths of an inch. The first 3 passes would be cut 3/1000ths of an inch oversized. And then that
Got it.
last pass will come down and it'll cut it to the exact size. It doesn't shave off more, it cuts it to the exact size at full depth. So,
Yeah.
um, now Rob Schuster, I don't know if you've seen some of his work, but Rob Schuster, Sidewinder Drums, is saying that's funny. For his puzzle projects, he also uses 0.003 on each piece for a
Ah,
total of 0.006.
I must
And
be doing something right then.
you certainly are. I don't know if you've seen Rob's work, but he has made drum shells out of puzzle pieces
Yeah. No, I saw some pictures.
and goes back and he actually cuts his to where the tongues, oh, the whole puzzle piece is beveled so that he can make that round shape of that drum shell. And I mean, you two together would be a dangerous combination, I'm telling you.
Well, I do have some cuts that I did a couple weeks ago.
Hmm.
So these are 0.03 a
Hmm.
piece,
Yeah.
and I can slide them very easily throughout. This has been sitting in the shop for about a month,
Uh-huh.
so the swelling isn't that bad. And
Right.
but somebody that's trying to put the puzzle together, this really does matter.
Yeah.
These little spaces really do matter. Um, but so you can see, getting everything aligned in your machine is absolutely critical. You
Yeah.
see that on the Y axis,
Uh-huh.
I was able to get that really tight
Hmm.
for that seam. But
Yeah.
then you notice right about here, I messed my zero up.
Uh-oh.
Because again,
Yeah.
there's 4 pieces of material that I'm cutting all these pieces out to make, one big
Yeah.
flag. And just being off on the zero, it can
It'll
throw you
do it.
for a loop.
It'll do it.
Yeah.
It'll do
But
it.
this is,
Oops.
the material that we used. So
So that is the skeleton there. Okay.
that's the skeleton. So I'm not wasting a whole lot of material, but at the same time, it's you got you got to aim small.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah. Okay, Russell Faraday is asking, so tool deflection is not an issue cutting that deep with a tiny cutter? What diameter bit are you using to cut those pieces out?
1/8 inch.
1/8 inch? And
Yep.
you don't have an issue with tool deflection?
I don't. But again, I'm only going at a max 0.15 as far as depth of cut for each
Yeah.
step down.
Okay.
And so that's conservative. But again, I got to get those chips out. If you don't get the chips out, and then all of a sudden you're making sawdust and it's stuck in that pocket that you're going around, it's gonna deflect on you
Yeah.
significantly.
Yeah.
But again, I have wiggle room because I'm only doing that final cleanup path, um, the very last step down when it
Yeah.
goes all the way around that again.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of, I'll have deflection and then I'll clean that deflection up with that final pass while
Okay.
still accounting for that tolerance.
Yeah, and that's where that separate last pass in the Vectric software really, really helps because it is exactly the same thing. You'll get those witness marks where it's plunging down to the next cut depth, but then that last pass is a completely, totally separate pass that lifts up out of the material and then ramps in on its own
Right.
and then cuts the entire piece to the proper dimensions in one pass, removing, say, 10 thousandths of an inch of material off.
Right.
And it
And
makes
again,
all the difference.
and I'm really conservative with my feed rates.
Mhm.
I'm not doing anything crazy fast. And
Yeah.
that has a lot to if you go too fast, it will do some pretty crazy things to you and you'll be off.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden now your pieces don't fit correctly or
Yeah.
so all those things really do matter.
So it's a lot of trial and error then to get everything dialed in.
Yeah. So I feel bad because a lot of people have been asking me for the drawing files.
Mhm.
I can 100% give the drawing files out, but it won't account for how you do your machine tool paths
Mhm.
to get the result you want. Because they're like, well, I can't figure out the offset. And I'm like, I feel bad because I didn't put the offset into the original file
Right.
because I'm accounting for it in the tool path.
Right. Yeah. The offset is not in the vectors, it's in the tool pathing.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Makes perfect sense. Dan Larson is asking, I'd like to know how Maurice holds or clamps the individual cubes when doing the fifth and sixth side of those satellite cubes.
Yeah, me. Um, so are you talking the end grain,
Yeah.
right?
We're down to work holding here.
Yeah. So
when
what's
you
nice is in the machine, this is one single cube in the
uh
machine, not the entire block.
right.
But I got these really nice hold down anchor points.
So you just put clamps inside those
Yep,
relief cuts and hold it down that way.
correct.
Slick. Sometimes it's the simplest ones that totally escape you.
And you can't put too much pressure on it because you can crack the material.
Sure, because you're
Um,
pulling against end grain.
right.
So
Yep. And but as long as you're careful with that, it's
mhm,
not going to move because it's anchored down.
yeah.
And then I have these little gator clips,
Mhm.
from Carbide.
Yeah.
They're okay.
Yeah.
They do exactly what I wanted to do. And then
I,
double-sided tape for everything.
I don't think we ever touched on that. If we did, I forgot it. What kind of CNC do you have?
I have the Shapeoko.
Okay.
This one's a 4 Pro. I'm probably going to get the 5 Pro here pretty soon, just because you can go all the way up to 4x4, and it's open ended. Um, but like the customer service is good, and like the entry point and the price point at the time,
Mhm.
like it was perfect.
Yeah.
And it's done everything that I've wanted to do so far.
Okay.
It's belt driven, so there's some give or take on that.
Sure.
Um, but as long as you're conservative,
Mhm.
like it'll do what you want it to do.
But if you're getting that kind of accuracy, it must be pretty good. I mean, obviously you got to do your maintenance and keep your belts tight and all that other good stuff. But
Right. Yep.
once you get it dialed in, so
Yeah.
now I know we're going to get questioned on this. And please, if you have any questions at all for Maurice or myself, put them in the chat and we'll get to them in due course. What kind of laser do you have? Is it is it a diode laser on the Shapeoko, or do you have a separate laser machine?
I have a separate one. I have the X Tool P2. I think it's 55-watt CO2 laser.
Okay.
And that thing has some unique features to it. The reason why I got that one specifically is one, it has a conveyor system.
Hmm.
So I can start doing larger, big sheets of veneer
Hmm.
that will just conveyor it in, and it will cut the entire length. And I can go all the way up to like 3 or 4 foot of
Wow.
material. The other feature that it has that I really like, and that's why I got it, was it has a 3D mapping software that will produce whatever surface that you have up to a certain degree.
Right.
And one of the videos I did an American wavy flag, and I used
Yes.
that laser to cut the stars and also do a personalized message. Um, and
Yes.
that was like right out of the box. That was the first time I ever interacted with their software. And yeah, it's that one right there. Yep.
Yep.
And it did a super good job, and it was really fast, and it really didn't have an issue with it.
And,
But veneer, like you can cut any kind of diode laser. It does like
mhm.
10 watts is probably the max you need to actually cut that veneer. It's so thin
Mhm.
um, that you don't need a 200-watt laser to do marquetry.
I just heard a collective. Well, that's good as far as money's concerned, but man, I wanted a 200-watt laser. I
Yeah.
just heard I just heard a lot of guys getting disappointed that now they can't justify getting the bigger laser, but that's all right. I mean, we got to do what we got to do. Um, I mean, well, let's see. We're here at about. Well, we got about 10 more minutes before we need to wrap it up. So let me ask you, and again, if there's any questions out there, please get them in. Um, what does the future hold for yourself? I mean, not on the personal side, but as far as your CNC or YouTube or the products that you're developing or that your projects are making, what does the future hold in store? Where do you plan on going from here?
Yeah, I think I'm still going to do a lot of marquetry, but I think I'm
Mhm,
going to get into larger projects,
mhm,
bigger wall art that associated with the marquetry. Um, I have a couple different projects that I'm going to make these miniature flags,
mhm,
and they're going to be kind of a certain, um, almost like an air freshener for cars, but I'm going to put a profile in the
mhm.
wavy flag profile, and then some attachments on the back so you can actually clip it into an air vent.
Ah,
I'm going to see where that goes.
mhm,
But again, and the only reason why I'm kind of doing that is because I want to get my machine into a production mode.
right.
So all the fixtures and everything to mass produce an item, like just kind of like how I did with the satellites,
Mhm.
and just can I make something and can I mass produce it and still keep the quality, and then really dial in the machine time and production costs, and you know that to me is a super cool challenge that I could probably get into and deep dive heavily into.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, I'm eager to see what you come up with on your channel, and I don't know how much of it you plan on videoing it, but I'm
yeah,
real interested in seeing it.
yeah,
Okay, so I've got a link to your YouTube channel in the description. I've also got a link to your website in the description. Are there any other social media links, Instagram or Twitter or X, I guess as they call it now, or any of that other stuff that you want to let folks know about?
yeah. No, I have an Instagram, and so I still haven't figured out the social media side of any of this. It's
Hmm.
hard for me to be consistent on posting pictures or reels or short or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah.
I'm slowly getting into that, and um, so you'll see more on the
Hmm.
social media side, which is
Okay.
great. And I'm going to redo my Patreon, and I think deep diving into Fusion 360 help guides,
Hmm.
tutorials, different videos. You'll start seeing a lot more of that. Um, and
I
then
know there is a big demand for that. People keep asking me to start learning Fusion 360 so I
yeah,
can teach them, and I'm like, listen, in the time it would take me to learn how to use it, you could already have it down. So why wait on me?
yeah.
Get into it.
And then the other big thing that's going to come up pretty soon is I just purchased a house,
Oh,
and so I'm going to use the CNC, the software, um, and start doing some big home improvement projects.
oh,
I have
nice.
a completely unfinished basement that is a blank canvas, and but I'm going to be very systematic and small, detailed type of things that will go into that with the other normal building. Um,
Oh, nice.
so that should be really cool.
I'm eager to see that too. Big
Yeah.
time. Steve Bradley is asking about a shop tour. I think
Oh,
we're too close to the bottom of the hour to do that now, but maybe a shop tour video on your
yeah.
channel.
It's a
You know,
very small 2-car garage, and
yeah.
It's packed. The majority of my shop right now is covered with uh, wood.
Yeah.
I have a ton of lumber right now.
Oh.
I did a couple big purchases to my wood guy in the Northwest,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
I have stacks of curly maple, walnut burl.
Hmm.
I've accumulated so much, and that again is the little projects that I've been selling. That's where it goes.
Welcome to the addiction.
Yep.
I am a major wood nerd. I have pieces of wood in there that I've been carrying around since we left Germany in 1992. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'll ever use them on anything, but they look good and I like them. So I am that wood nerd.
Yeah. And so I was never a wood nerd
Mhm.
until I got into veneer.
Mhm.
And when I first started woodworking, I knew what walnut was, and that was
Mhm.
the extent of it.
Yeah.
And the different types of strength and hardness, and I had no idea any of that stuff. I knew pine and walnut, and that was the extent.
Yep.
But when I deep dived into veneer and I saw the different burls and different, you know, African X and mahogany, like everything was that's where I learned exactly what wood is and what it
Mhm.
looked like and what it
Yeah.
could be.
Yeah.
Um, so that's
Yeah.
been a huge thing.
It 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 becomes an addiction and it can take over your life. I'm in a 12 by 16 over glorified garden shed, and I still don't have enough room for everything. Eric Girth is asking dumb question. What are veneers? Veneers are thin, very thin slices of wood. The easiest demonstration of that is the face of plywood. Plywood is made up of layers of veneers. So,
Let me I got a good analogy.
okay, do you have a
Um,
piece for to demo
I
or?
have a piece, but I'll show you the importance of veneer. Um, yeah. So this is a little bit thicker veneer. I made this out of walnut, but you can see that this is an eighth of an inch. You can get very, very thin.
Yeah.
But this was not a quarter rough lumber that I just made into very thin sheets of veneer. That's the basis of it. But when you start dealing with exotic hardwoods, this is zero cotty. I
Mhm.
don't think I even pronounced that correctly. This stuff is extremely expensive. And when you work in blocks, which this is inlaid, um, the amount of the price per square foot of this is just astronomical. And if I can get more material out of this and veneer it on a substrate, I can get more use out of this one block than I would
Yeah.
another piece. So
Right.
um,
That's one of the advantages of
yeah,
using veneer is that you can take rosewood veneer and you can apply it to a substrate and folks won't know that that's not a solid piece of rosewood if you
right.
do it right.
If you do it right, and that solves swelling issues and wood
Mhm.
movement and
Right. So, okay, before we wrap up, I got to ask everybody. I do the same thing and it tends to put people on the spot, but what is the one question I should have asked you but I didn't?
uh I think you asked me pretty much everything.
Really?
Um, yeah, yep,
Well, I ask that because sometimes people go into an interview like this and they don't know what to expect, but you have mental conversations with yourself. And there's usually something that you'd like to bring up but haven't, that I
yeah.
didn't get to.
No, I think we covered
We
pretty
covered it
much
all.
everything. So
Okay.
wish I could have shared more different projects that I've done. I've done a lot of really, really cool things that I've never shown anyone other than just the person that received it.
Well,
And
now we got to have you back. So
I
you can't just drop that on me in the final
know,
30 seconds and say, yeah, see you, have a good day. No, now
but
we got to have you back.
that's my lack of inexperience with social media and posting the work and
Okay.
um, advertising myself out to
Mhm.
you know this just massive thing that social media is.
It is really huge. And but I find the only thing that gets me through it sometimes is well, it's kind of like talking to the camera now. I talk to the camera like it owes me money or wants to try to date my daughter.
Right.
So, but hey, we all handle it in our own ways. So if folks want to try to get a hold of you for something, if they have questions, comments, concerns, how can they get a hold of you? What's the best way?
Yeah, best way is my email address is posted on my YouTube channel in the
Okay.
about section or my
Okay.
website, the edesignandwoodworking.com.
Right.
You can send me a contact message there.
Okay.
And I live in my email address. So, matter of
All right.
fact,
Okay. Well, I put a link to the website and to your YouTube channel in the description here. So folks want to get a hold of you, they can hit you up through the contact us link on the website or on the about section of your fact. I'll go ahead and throw that up for folks just to show what I'm talking about here. Um, Go right up here and boom, there it is. There's everything you need to know. You'll click on that, prove you're not a robot, and there you'll see his email address. So
matter of fact, somebody just sent me an email
there you
just
go.
now. So,
There you
I'll
go.
respond to you right after this.
Sargon, good friend of the channel, wants to know how much sleep do you get?
Oh, not enough.
I knew that. How did I know that
Not
answer
enough.
was coming? Not
But
enough.
it's like anything else. I'll leave the shop exhausted and I'll go to
Mhm.
bed. I'll sit in bed and I'll just think about every little thing
Dangerous.
that's upcoming or the things that I wanted to do or I'll sit there and I'll think about it. That's 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 how I know that I'm in the right space and that's what I really enjoy it. So,
Okay. Well, I got to tell you that this doesn't seem like it's been an hour and a half, but we do need to go ahead and wrap this up. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you on, and I truly appreciate you spending part of your Sunday with me.
no, it was a
And
super pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
yeah, and I'm going to have to ask you to come on again. We'll talk about that later on. But folks, get over to Maurice's channel. That's Erickson Design and Woodworking. There is a link again to his YouTube channel and his website down in the description of this video. And get over there and subscribe and prepare to be amazed. Go back and binge watch. You currently have 45 videos coming up. Here's hoping that gets to be a lot more fairly soon, but I understand it becomes a grind. I get it. So let's see. Next week, I hope to have my spoil board finished. I've already got a project up there waiting. And so hopefully that'll be next week's video. Channel members, tomorrow we have another guest. Our own Jim Matthews is going to he's going to dazzle us with some of his enhancements to some of Corbin Dunn's designs that he's come up with. If you don't know what I'm talking about, or if you would like a information on becoming a channel member, click the join link down there next to the subscribe button. Panel will pop up and a video play tell you all about channel membership. We have a real good time. We have a great bunch of people. Channel members, check the community tab here on my YouTube channel. You'll find both links for tomorrow's members only live Q&A. And I'm going down the mental checklist in my brain. I think I've mentioned everything. Yes, I have. So I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up and say thank you very much, Maurice. And thank you to everybody for spending part of your Sunday with us. And y'all take care.
Cheers.